All right, so we're diving into Ghostbusters, a movie that honestly, on paper, sounds totally bonkers.
Right.
Scientists, ghosts, a giant marshmallow man, but it works. And we're going to figure out why.
It's become this cultural phenomenon, and what this source really gets into is how they blend humor, the characters, even those special effects we all know, to make something special.
And they get right to it. Like the opening scene, the Ghostbusters' reaction to their new HQ sets the tone perfectly.
Totally. You've got these scientists fresh out of like the academic world starting a business, and it's in this rundown firehouse.
That fire hydrant scene, comedy gold. The movie's basically saying, yeah, they might be geniuses, but they still deal with everyday stuff.
Exactly. That relatability is key. This source really emphasizes that. They're not perfect heroes. They're flawed, a little rough around the edges.
Makes you root for them even more, don't you think? We've all been there. Maybe not fighting ghosts, but definitely battling leaky faucets, right?
Absolutely. The source talks about this, showing those everyday struggles. It makes us want heroes who are human, just like us.
We see ourselves in their wins, their struggles, even their quirks. And speaking of quirks, their dynamic is fantastic. Bill Murray's Venkman, so dry, playing off of Rames's Egon, who's much more grounded.
Comedy gold. This source points out that constant friction, those clashing personalities, it's where a lot of the best humor comes from.
And then you've got Ray Aykroyd, just nails that earnest enthusiasm. He's the heart, the one who really believes in all this.
Absolutely. And each character brings something different, which the source talks about too. Even Winston coming in later with that great line, if there's a paycheck, I'll believe anything. He adds this grounded, almost street smart perspective.
Which, let's be real, we've all thought at some point in our jobs. But the point is, they're so different, yet you totally buy their friendship. They'd face down anything together.
And that goes back to the relatability thing. The humor comes from them, from how they interact. We laugh with them, not at them, as they deal with this crazy situation.
And speaking of laughing, the humor in this movie, it's not just the characters, it's the jokes themselves, the way it's delivered. This source calls out Bill Murray's Venkman as a perfect example.
Buffalo, Murray's timing is just, like, iconic. But it's also, like the source says, the way they blend the sarcasm, the absurdity. Even some sci-fi stuff gets thrown in.
It's smart and hilarious, which is a tough combo to pull off.
Exactly.
Like that line when they first see the firehouse and Venkman just goes, this place should be condemned. It's the delivery, the context. Perfect.
Exactly. It's not just a silly joke, it's clever, unexpected. The way it's said makes it even funnier.
And speaking of things done right, we got to talk about the ghosts themselves. This sauce makes a fascinating point that the lack of CGI is actually what makes them work.
It's funny, right? Nowadays, it's all about photorealistic creatures on computers. But back then, Ghostbusters used practical effects, puppets, costumes, all that. And it gives them this realness, this tangibility that still holds up today.
So like Slimer, how'd they do that without CGI? He's see-through, he's oozing all over the place.
It's amazing the artistry involved. The source actually goes into it. They use remote controls, translucent materials, a whole team of puppeteers working together.
Wow. I can picture those behind-the-scenes clips. The work put into that is insane.
It is. And that's what the source is saying, that dedication creates this realism, this feeling that they actually exist in the movie's world, which, for a story about believing in the unbelievable, is crucial.
Makes them feel like part of the same world as the actors, not just added on top later. And that realness is probably a big reason why it still works so well, even now.
Exactly. It taps into that fear of the unknown, the idea that something's out there, lurking. But also, there's a visual humor to it, wouldn't you say?
Oh, totally. Slimer demolishing that buffet, the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man stomping through New York. It's hilarious, A&D, kind of awe-inspiring because of how real it feels.
And that brings us to something else. Ghostbusters nails. The sensory experience. The visuals are one thing, but that soundtrack, that theme song, pure 80s goodness.
You hear that, you think Ghostbusters, no question. So catchy, so much energy. It just fits that spooky but fun vibe perfectly.
Totally. And like the source says, it's not just background noise, it's part of the story. It builds the humor, the suspense, that feeling of adventure.
And it's more than just the music, right? It's the Ecto-1, those proton packs, even the little No Ghosts logo you see everywhere.
Oh, yeah, they're iconic. They're totally part of our culture now.
It's like they represent this whole feeling, you know? Being a kid again, watching Ghostbusters, believing anything's possible for a little bit.
This source actually makes that point, that they tap into this nostalgia, this desire for maybe a simpler time, when movies could be scary A&D funny.
Totally. But even with all the crazy effects, the ghosts, the gadgets, it never loses that human element. Like, some of the best scenes are the quiet ones between the characters.
Absolutely. It's about the balance, right? And this source talks about that. It
Mm.
never feels mean or cynical, even when it's about ghosts and demons and stuff.
Mhm.
There's this real warmth, a camaraderie that comes through.
Like that scene with Venkman and Dana on her couch. He's trying to downplay the whole possessed by a demon thing.
Exactly.
Hilarious, but kind of sweet too.
It is. It proves the source's point about that balance they strike, the humor and the heart.
Okay, we've covered a lot, but there's
Yeah.
one scene the source points out as being, well, a little different.
You mean the one with Ray and the,
Yeah, the ghost. It's a moment that honestly hasn't aged well.
it is a little, yeah.
This source doesn't dwell on it, but it acknowledges that it might raise some eyebrows today.
It's true. What flew back then?
Right. It's a good reminder that times change. What was okay then might not be now.
Definitely something to think about with older movies.
For sure. But it doesn't ruin the movie, that's for sure. It's
Yeah.
just a product of its time.
Exactly. The source makes it clear this one scene doesn't take away from the rest of it.
So we've got relatable characters, smart humor, those groundbreaking effects, even the way it's become this cultural phenomenon, it's all here.
It really makes the case for why it's still so loved all these years later.
Absolutely. And for anyone listening who's maybe only seen the newer ones or just heard about it, go watch the original.
It's worth it, trust me.
This deep dive has just scratched the surface. There's so much to uncover.
It's true. It's amazing how one movie can spark so much discussion, even now.
Exactly. So until next time, keep watching, keep thinking, and keep diving deep into those sources.